This is CGTN, China Global Television Network.
We have the latest updates on the coronavirus outbreak, plus Africa's efforts to fight misinformation. Libya's government of national accord suspends its participation in all ongoing UN talks. And 9 people killed in a mass shooting in Germany. This is CGTN. Welcome to Africa Live with me, Beatrice Marshall, in Nairobi. Also coming up on the program. In your business news, China's Huawei is on course to bag Kenya's 5G contract. And Kenya names a 13-man squad to the Los Angeles and Vancouver Rugby Sevens legs. We start with the latest on the coronavirus outbreak. The total number of confirmed cases in China has surpassed 74,000. The death toll is now at over 2,000, while more than 16,000 have recovered. The country reported less than 400 new cases on Wednesday. Hubei province, where the outbreak started, reported more than 300, a dramatic drop from previous days. And the daily new cases outside Hubei have dropped for 16 consecutive days. The provinces of Guangdong, Sichuan and Henan have also been hard hit, with each reporting more than 1,100 cases. Beijing has reported 395 and Shanghai 334. The virus has spread to 25 other countries, which altogether have reported over 1,000 cases. Japan is the worst hit, with 3 deaths and 706 cases. Most of them are passengers on a cruise ship. A man and a woman in their 80s who were on board have reportedly died of infections. Now, officials from the State Council's Joint Prevention and Control Mechanism have been detailing efforts by medical staff to contain the coronavirus outbreak. At a press conference today, they said 278 teams and 32,395 medical staff have gone to Wuhan from around the country. Other medical workers around the country are working in their communities to fight the disease. The government has published compensation and subsidy packages for their staff. On Wednesday, Chinese President Xi Jinping stressed the importance of protecting medical workers and the need to ensure their health and well-being as they care for tens of thousands of patients. Well, the Central Steering Group supervising efforts in Hubei province says China's efforts to relieve shortages of medical supplies have improved the situation.
The Central Steering Group in Hubei is firmly implementing the directions and instructions from the CPC Central Committee, and we have made people's health as our top priority. We're doing what we can to mobilize and arrange resources nationwide and ensure that we have adequate daily necessities and supplies. Key medical resources can be guaranteed at the present, and we have relatively adequate daily necessities for the people here. As for medical resources, at the beginning we were running short, but now we have adequate resources.
Meanwhile, Wuhan residents remain under strict orders not to leave their homes, but some are getting restless and anxious to return to their daily routines. CGTN's Tao Yuan reports on how they are coping.
The loudspeakers broadcast the latest rules. Before, a single person from each household could leave the residential compound once every 3 days. Now, all are ordered to stay home until further notice.
These are unprecedented measures. I've never experienced anything like this, nor has anyone else.
At apartment complexes across the city, entry is restricted to residents only after a temperature test. Only residents with medical emergencies or those with jobs related to fighting the epidemic are allowed to leave. Groceries are purchased online, left at the entrances and picked up later to avoid contact.
This is 2 weeks worth of food, and then we won't leave home for 2 weeks.
Hu Hao lives in a community in Wuhan called Hualou. After the restrictions were put in place, he took up the task of organizing group buying for his compound.
I usually send out a message through the compound's WeChat group. Those who need to buy things can respond.
Community workers are on hand 24 hours a day for those in need, like elderly people who don't know how to shop online, or people like this girl who looks after her sick grandmother.
You can't buy things even if you had money nowadays.
Community worker Zhou Tingting has had little rest since the epidemic broke out.
I'd never imagined I could function on 2 to 3 hours of sleep a day. Everything counts on our strong determination. I think we are the first line of defense, and the doctors and nurses are already under immense pressure.
Still, for some, the restrictions have become a lot to bear. This elderly man from a different complex wants to go out to buy medicine for his diabetes and refused to go home after a policeman volunteered to run to the drugstore for him. He says he misses his daily walks outside. And there's no signs that he'll get that leisurely activity back anytime soon. Taoyuan CGTN, Wuhan.
Well, the disease itself is not the only challenge in Wuhan. As CGTN Xu Mengqi finds out, there are many people who are working hard to keep the city functioning on a daily basis.
There are few places in the city that are stinkier than the septic tank of a public toilet. Disinfecting them used to be routine for Wuhan sanitary workers. But ever since experts found novel coronavirus in patients' stools, the job has become somewhat riskier.
I am a bit afraid, to be honest, but this is my job.
There are other places where sanitary workers could come into contact with potential contagion. Prior to the COVID-19 outbreak, Wuhan's medical trash was handled by environmental professionals. But now with tens of thousands of patients receiving treatment, every day there's an overwhelming amount of medical waste. And a special task force among sanitary workers was set up to cope with the challenge.
There is a strict disinfection procedure to follow when we collect the medical waste, and we transport them to a designated incinerator.
This special force often work on short notice, as medical waste needs to be disposed of as soon as possible to avoid secondary pollution.
Sanitary workers tell me that for 3 weeks now they've been on standby 24 hours a day to collect medical garbage. The nature of the work makes everyone nervous, and so a lunch break becomes a time to let down their guard and relax for a bit.
Wuhan is our big home. To protect it, we have to fight against the virus until it surrenders. We have the confidence to win. Go Wuhan!
For the residents of Wuhan and for all the people working on the front line, we can contribute our bit of effort. I feel quite proud.
It is true that in the battle against an epidemic, everyone has a part to play. Xu Mengqi, CGTN, Wuhan.
Well, let's cross over now to Tang Bo, who is live for us in Wuhan. Tang Bo, thank you for joining us on Africa Live. Now, Wuhan is the epicenter of the outbreak. What is the latest on the efforts to fight the outbreak?
Well, let me update with a little bit more details. And according to China's National Health Commission, by the end of Monday, that Chinese mainland reported biggest drop in new coronavirus outbreak infections in almost a month, with 394 new confirmed cases. And as for Hubei province, it reports 349 new confirmed cases. At the same time, across the entire province, there have been 108 new health facilities and also 1,209 people discharged from hospital, bringing total to 10,337. And we have also seen a very large decay in the number of emergency calls, which dropped from about 15,000 daily on January the 26th to less than 3,000 calls today. So in general, the growth rate of the new confirmed cases has been dropping, and at the same time there has been an increasing number of patients discharged from hospital, and we have seen that the number of daily new cases outside Hubei province has been dropping for 12 consecutive days. Back to you.
Well, several medical workers, though, have died from the disease, as we understand. Tell us more about measures that have been put in place to protect medical workers.
Well, as you just mentioned, that the Chinese President Xi Jinping has called for greater priority to be given to the protection and care of medical workers, saying that they are the pillar of the fight against the outbreak. And the President Xi also stressed that the government demand, dispatch, and logistical measures should be scientific so as to ensure and alleviate the pressure of medical workers, and also to ensure that their living standards, especially for those who came from the other provinces to help, have a decent living standard, and when they are staying in Hubei province and also in the epic city of Wuhan. And also we should note that there has been a lot of infection control departments in those designated hospitals across Hubei province. They are taking the responsibilities of checking on how well those medical workers, especially those from other provinces, manage their skills of wearing and, more importantly, taking off protective gear. And trainings about self-protections is also available, especially for those medical workers from other provinces, because they don't have much experiences dealing with an epidemic like this, dealing with such a sophisticated situation. And also those department workers and medical workers from the infection control department across the province take the responsibilities of testing all those protective gear received by the hospital, so as to ensure that they are well protected before they go out to help and treat the patient. Back to you.
All right, Tang Bo joining us there from Wuhan with the very latest update. Thank you. Now, in Hong Kong, a charter plane has arrived carrying the city's residents allowed to leave the Diamond Princess cruise ship in Japan. Our correspondent Shu Dan has more from Hong Kong.
Finally home. After being stranded on board the infamous Diamond Princess cruise ship in Japan for 14 days. The first chartered flight arranged by the Hong Kong government has landed back in Hong Kong's international airport. On board, 106 Hong Kong residents who all tested negative for coronavirus.
In the past 10 days, I stayed in my room almost 23 hours a day. I kept comforting my wife, telling her, don't be scared.
The evacuated passengers will now spend the next 2 weeks living back under quarantine. They're being put up in newly built public housing with all the basic necessities of daily living: beds, tables, fans, and wheelchairs for the elderly. Chief Executive Carrie Lam paid a visit to the housing estate in the Fulton area of Hong Kong.
You are the main strength of this battle. Keep fighting. Hopefully we can win this battle as soon as possible. Thank you very much.
Having just spent the past fortnight in isolation in their cabins, not all the passengers are happy to be living back under quarantine, but others say it's best to be safe.
If I caught the virus and I spread it after I came back to Hong Kong, I will be the sinner through the ages.
The Diamond Princess was on a 16-day trip around Japan, Hong Kong, Vietnam, and Taiwan when it was quarantined off the Japanese port of Yokohama 2 weeks ago. It followed reports that an 80-year-old man who disembarked in Hong Kong had tested positive for coronavirus. The passengers' holiday then took a dramatic turn as they were asked to stay in their cabins while crew brought them food and supplies.
I feel like I live in a cage full of virus. All around me is virus. I'm so worried.
More than 600 passengers on board the Diamond Princess cruise ship have now tested positive for the coronavirus. Among them, over 50 Hong Kong residents.
Results are still pending for some passengers who have been tested for the coronavirus. Hong Kong's government is preparing to send one more chartered flight to Japan, along with 70 officials, to help support more than 350 Hong Kong residents who are still on board the Diamond Princess. Judan, CGTN, Hong Kong.
Now, misinformation has always been an element of people's response to disease, particularly in an outbreak. We look at how irresponsible sharing of unverified information could harm human health or lead to unnecessary panic. CGTN's Chaum Gono unpacks the story.
The scope and speed by which social media enables misinformation is unimaginable.
As a Chinese citizen and journalist, are you worried about the rise and escalation in anti-China racism as a result of this latest controversy?
It's the Western media reports. For example, Der Spiegel, one of the most circulated magazines in Europe. They have a headline that read this: the virus, regarding the coronavirus, a little racism is fine. And quote, thanks to the yellow-skinned slit eyes, that we may all be dead soon. And you have the Wall Street Journal, of course, calling China the real sick man of Asia. These are really concerning issues because now some Westerners are calling the coronavirus the China virus, but I didn't remember people calling Zika the Brazil virus or Ebola the Congo virus. So people need not panic. People need facts. People should look at it in an objective manner.
Misinformation and disinformation are problems when you have the outbreak of a disease. And the reason that is because for people to make the right decisions and access the health care they need in that moment, they need the correct information. And so when that doesn't happen, then their health and ultimately their lives are placed at risk. Before this outbreak of coronavirus, the world was dealing with a resurgence in measles because people had refused to be vaccinated over false information that the MMR vaccine was causing some harm.
With over 70,000 confirmed cases and no cure, many people are browsing the internet for answers. Unfortunately, more people are likely to share the wrong advice on social media.
We are really afraid. We do not even know if the state has put in place cells or appropriate measures in our hospitals to deal with possible cases of contamination. Besides, the populations have no information on this coronavirus.
So here is a story that ran in Lagos, Nigeria, and it was saying that Lagos had confirmed 9 cases of coronavirus and 4 deaths. But this story was actually lifted almost word for word from another one that was talking about Lassa fever. And so once we looked at this story, it was very clear to us that this would have been a massive event. If the government had asked a court for this permission, it would have been a massive event. People would have reported about it. But there's absolutely nothing about this in China. So this cannot be believed. So this was the picture that was manipulated, right, to show that he was wearing a face mask. And what that does is it can perpetuate racial discrimination.
Social media experts and health officials say efforts to guide users to verified sources on subjects can save lives.
It's important to note that because it's a very new disease, that a lot is still being learned about it.
As scientists predict more outbreaks in future, sharing unverified information remains a risk, especially during a global emergency. Chom Hono, CGTN.
China's economy is slowly getting back on its feet. CGTN's senior editor Douglas Okwach said this as he was attending a talk show of Kenya's Switch Television. Switch TV is fully owned by the Red Cross and has Kenyan and African young people as their primary target market. During the show, Douglas Okwach spoke of China's latest efforts in fighting the novel coronavirus outbreak, African countries' capabilities to prevent the outbreak, and what the Chinese government is doing to get business operations back to normal.
All right, it's been a panic situation for quite some time here in the country, all over the world, and the coronavirus thing, and of course the virus itself, also now known as COVID-19, has been something that indeed no one can miss to mention. And in studio, I'm actually proud to be joined by Douglas Okwach from CGTN. He's a Talk Africa editor to give us now what's happening on the ground in China and of course in some other areas here in the continent. Good to see you, Bwana Douglas, today.
Thank you, Nick.
All right.
It's my pleasure.
Okay. So let's quickly go into the thick of things, because now when you talk about these updates, every day is a new day as far as the virus is concerned. And so many fears, especially in the continent, is coming through. But look, we had a case in Egypt. How was it handled, first of all?
Yeah.
Thank you, Nick. I think this is a very important topic that we need to thrash out.
Mm-hmm.
I think there should be no need for panic. I think panic comes about because of widespread misinformation.
Okay.
And as like yourself has already stated, there hasn't been so far, and I repeat so far,
okay,
on the African continent, a confirmed case of coronavirus.
Okay.
Initially, the situation might have looked a little bit dicey.
Okay.
Because at the beginning, only 2 African countries had the capacity to test, to screen for the virus,
all right,
which was Senegal and South Africa. And you remember even the Kenyan case, the samples were actually taken to South Africa, and they turned out negative. I think the situation is getting better, and now, apart from South Africa, other African countries like Ghana, Madagascar, Nigeria, and Sierra Leone have joined the pack of African countries that now have the capacity to screen for the virus.
Absolutely.
And I think within a short time, there'll be about 36 African countries. That's more than half the number of countries on the continent. So that should be reassuring for us enough. Regarding what has happened on the China end of things, I think it's not enough to say how much China has done. I think China's response was timely. It was on a very, very large scale, unprecedented, and it's received all-round praise, including from the World Health Organization. The international community generally has been pleased with how China has handled the situation. And as we talk now, I think there's already a report done by China's own Center for Disease Control, and which it has shared with the WHO. And on the basis of that report, the WHO says it will not revise the risk status of coronavirus globally. So that should be reassuring enough. I think a lot is being done on the Chinese side. And the statistics, like we say, keep changing. But what we are noticing more now is a downward trend of infection rates, of deaths. So if it had spiked, I think we are now beginning to see it climbing down.
All right. Looking back to China as a nation, the economy is kind of shaky right now. And when you talk about even some companies in Japan having had to close down because most of their main spare parts coming from China, how is the recovery tactic here?
I think China is doing a lot to turn around, to put in a reverse gear the general slowing down trend caused by the coronavirus. But what we are seeing is that China is trying to implement a lot of measures that are business friendly. For example, we are seeing tax cuts. We are seeing rebates. We are seeing low interest loan rates. And we are seeing insurance claims of companies that were affected by the coronavirus being fast-tracked for payment. And we are seeing also China injecting up to $1.7 trillion yuan into the financial markets to give it a kick. We are seeing China reducing the bureaucracy for businesses. We are seeing China giving priority to enterprises and companies that make medical kits, that import agricultural products. So a lot is being done in China, as you've heard, to kickstart the economy. And there's a vote of confidence issued by big companies, like Hyundai has just started resumed manufacturing,
but not fully.
Not fully, of course. It's a bit slow, but it will catch up. Not fully, but it's yeah.
Now, the engagement between CGTN Africa and local media houses on information gathering and sharing on the novel coronavirus or COVID-19 is paying off. Local journalists have admitted the cooperation is helping to fight misinformation that can spread unnecessary fear and cause panic. Switch television anchor Nicholas Mudimba says apart from discrimination and stigmatization, misinformation undermines people's willingness to follow legitimate public health advice.
How would you describe the cooperation between CGTN and the local media in terms of providing factual information on the outbreak by engaging local media houses such as yours?
The beauty about it is that now the cooperation or the partnership with the local media means now the Kenyans will be getting factual news. And you see, once we depend so much on international news, that means we're getting conflicting figures, conflicting reports. Now the partnership itself will help now the locals in the country understand the real issues on the ground, because now as CGTN, you have the first-hand information coming from China. So that for me, that means it will be easier for the locals to understand that indeed CGTN says it now through other media houses. That means now we're getting the right information.
CGTN is also facilitating interviews with our correspondents back in Wuhan in China at the epicenter with local media. Do you think that as well goes a long way in creating confidence in how China is trying to control this, and in terms of also doing away with misinformation?
Yeah, sure. I've watched a good story on CGTN about a reporter who went and visited a patient in hospital. That's big. And you see, by having that confidence as a reporter, as a team, to go directly to this affected person, it shows something. It shows that indeed the recovery methods or the recovery kind of ways are really successful. So for me, as CGTN, I can say doing a good job in terms of now publicizing all the situation, from the affected ones to the recovery methods, how they actually taken through recovery. People have died of this. You don't get to see the good stories about the recovery. So for me, CGTN is doing a good job in terms of just making sure that people understand that this thing is being fought in all ways.
You're watching Africa Live. Still ahead on the program. Libya's government of national accord suspends its participation in all ongoing UN talks. And 9 people are killed in a mass shooting in Germany.
How will your world change today? What happens here? What happens there? Or what you make happen for yourself? If it matters to you, it matters to us too. Your stories are the stories that need to be told. Africa Live. Find your voice. Africa Live. Find your voice.
To the latest now on the Libyan conflict. The UN has launched 3 tracks of negotiations: economic, military and political. Libya's government of national accord has, however, suspended its participation in all ongoing UN talks. It is accusing rebels of launching attacks. CGTN's Adel Mahroui has more.
Libya's government of national accord has suspended 1 week ahead the UN-planned Libyan political dialogue.
The Libyan parliament is currently working on selecting a delegation of 13 members, which will represent it in the upcoming Geneva talks. On Tuesday, the parliament approved the methodologies of selecting them. That will be according to the principle of representing the most constituencies possible.
The upcoming talks should be formed from 3 delegations, 2 to represent the Western and Eastern blocs, and the third, formed of independent Libyan politicians, the UN will select. But with the possible new beginning of talks, suspicions between the warring factions emerge.
Any agreement reached will be threatened security-wise. There are outlawed groups which have weapons. The GNS decision are apparently implemented by itself. It cannot control these groups. We've seen previously negotiations where agreements have been reached, but they have never been implemented by the militias.
The Geneva political talks were initially scheduled to take place on February 26.
The Eastern Libyan parliament is saying that its delegation will not sign any agreement in Geneva, even if one is achieved. And the government of National Accord is temporarily suspending participation in any kind of talks. So it appears that the political dialogue in Geneva has already failed, even before it has started. Adel Mahroui, CGTN, Cairo.
Meanwhile, Ugandan President Yoweri Museveni and his Rwandan counterpart Paul Kagame are scheduled to meet on Friday in a bid to strengthen their frosty relations. President Museveni and President Kagame are expected to meet at Katuna, a border point shared between the two countries. Months of tensions have seen the two neighbors accusing each other of espionage and political killings.
We welcomed the ongoing dialogue initiated by His Excellency President Felix Tshisekedi and the President of Angola in order to promote better relations between all the countries in the region.
At least 9 people have been shot dead at 2 shisha lounges in the German city of Hanau. According to local authorities, a gunman suspected of launching the heinous attack has been found dead at his home. Another body was also found at the suspect's home. The motive of the attack is still unclear, but investigations are ongoing. The latest incident comes just 4 days after a shooting at a Berlin concert venue where 1 person was killed and several others were injured. In South Africa, the devastating water crisis, which the city of Cape Town has experienced in the past 3 to 4 years, has been a huge wake-up call, according to local authorities. The city has launched a water strategy which seeks to prevent the city's taps from running dry. With the new strategy, Cape Town hopes to move away from its reliance on surface water and diversify its sources. CGTN's Renee Delcam has more.
The Cape Town water strategy is a long-term, ambitious plan aimed at guiding Cape Town towards becoming a water-resilient city in 10 years' time, and a water-sensitive one which is resilient, livable, productive and sustainable by 2040.
The strategy has 5 key commitments that looks at additional water security, greater sustainability and resilience to ensure that we become far more resilient towards the impact and the risk of drought, but most importantly also using this opportunity to develop Cape Town to become a water-sensitive city, which is one where we optimize all sources of water to ensure a far more livable city for all.
We've got 5 commitments that we're making to our customers. The first, that all customers have access to good quality water and sanitation, and there we're particularly focusing on informal settlement sanitation. The second is that we have wise water use. So as we did during the drought, we use the right amount of water with the right tariffs, with the right policies that are restricting it. The third is that we have enough supply beyond our surface water to be able to resist future droughts.
The city's water strategy has been given a major boost by the German government in the form of grant funding of over $6 million.
The city has received a huge vote of confidence by the German government, who have given grant funding amounting to 5.7 million euro, or approximately 93 million rand, to fund a range of projects within the water strategy. For the German government to consider such a substantial investment into the implementation of the city's water strategy is a significant indication of good faith and confidence in the exemplary work that the city has produced by our water and sanitation department.
Cape Town has managed to reduce its daily water consumption from between 1.2 to 1.5 billion litres of water per day to around 600 million litres a day at present.
And besides being known as the city that nearly ran out of water in 2018, Cape Town is now also known as the #1 water-saving city in the world. Renee Delcam, CGTN, Cape Town, South Africa.
And your business news coming up next. Here's what's ahead. China's Huawei on course to bag Kenya's 5G contract. And South Africa Statistics Council threatened to quit over a poor funding.
Africa is the nexus of enterprise, and global business will tell you why it matters.
From the mega investment projects to multi-billion-dollar mergers and acquisitions.
Africa today collects, just in terms of revenues from taxes alone, $545 billion a year. If you take 10% of that and you devote it to the energy sector, problem solved.
All this on Global Business, weekdays at this time on CGTN.
Africa Live. Find your voice.
Kenya's biggest telecoms operator, Safaricom, will consider awarding a contract to China's Huawei as it rolls out its 5G network this year. The firm's acting CEO, Michael Joseph, said Safaricom would follow guidelines from its two main shareholders, South Africa's Vodacom and Britain's Vodafone. Involving Huawei in Safaricom's 5G network could hamper talks on a free trade agreement between the United States and Kenya, which were announced this month. The United States government has been urging its European allies and others not to use Huawei, one of Safaricom's network vendors, along with Nokia, citing security concerns. The South African economy may find itself in deeper trouble in the coming weeks if its statistical department does not get a cash injection. Statistics South Africa has been in need of funding for a few years now, after its budget was cut due to the government's financial constraints. Here's CGTN Sumitra Naidu with the story.
Statistics South Africa is a globally recognized center of excellence for producing official statistics. Over the years, it's improved data collection and analysis and taken on new statistical reporting, but funding has been reducing.
This year, I think we were first promised 50 million, then it became 46, then it became 45, and they've said you're going to get 45 million in April on condition that you further cut your staff. And we're saying, come on, this is the exact opposite. We need to increase our staff, not cut them. We're sitting on a 20% vacancy rate, which means that people are being stretched to do far more work than they should. So we're trying to wave the red flag now, rather than wait for something to go terribly wrong.
The situation is so dire that the entire Statistics Council wants to resign, arguing that they simply can't do their jobs credibly anymore.
We will resign, the entire council. If we resign, my Statistician General is unable to release official statistics. And we're obliged immediately to inform the IMF. For example, we're a reporting agency for the IMF. We'll have to report to UN Stats, to Africa Stats and so on. If there's no council to endorse the release by the Statistician General of all official statistics, then frankly there are no official statistics. And that can be a very dangerous place to be in.
Understanding the importance of this department is critical. Statistics South Africa collates and analyzes data from every single sector of this economy in order for government to make important decisions and for the rest of the world to understand South Africa as a country.
Stats SA says it needs $17 million this year in order to continue its services. If this is not forthcoming in the budget allocations to be announced next week, this department may grind to a halt. Sumitra Naidu, CGTN, Johannesburg, South Africa.
Zimbabwean Vice President Constantino Chiwenga says he would like to express his gratitude to Chinese President Xi Jinping and the Chinese government for fighting the novel coronavirus. He added that he is confident that the Chinese economy will recover despite the current situation. Chiwenga made these comments when he received a short interview with the Chinese media based in Harare after a meeting with Chinese ambassador to Zimbabwe, Guo Xiaochun, who paid a courtesy call on him.
I want to give my special gratitude to President Xi Jinping and the Chinese authorities for having come up with all the strategies which they put together to fight this deadly coronavirus in China, and also to coordinate with all the countries in the world, especially with WHO on this virus. Definitely, I have got the full confidence on the Chinese economy. yes, this is the temporal setback that the population had to follow the orders which they were given by the authorities not to move from province to province in a bid to contain this deadly virus. But this is just temporary. The Chinese economy will just, just again pick up, and I'm not worried about it. I'm very confident about the Chinese economy.
The British government has published a controversial new plan to limit immigration. The numbers of workers coming into the country from the European Union was regarded as one of the driving factors behind the success of the Brexit campaign in 2016. However, as Richard Bestick reports from London, the plan has raised concern among some in the UK business community.
Home Secretary Priti Patel says the UK's new immigration rules are all about taking back control of Britain's borders and delivering the people's priorities. The goal of the Australian-style point system to bring down immigration.
Well, I think it's important to reflect that the system that we are introducing is about the brightest and the best. We want to encourage people with the skills, the right talent to come to the UK. And we do want to end and reduce the level of numbers of people that have been coming to the United Kingdom with low skills.
However, the plan represents a disaster in Britain's social care sector, according to the public services trade union Unison, the industry heavily dependent on migrant workers.
If you think of the care sector in this country, we already have huge vacancies. There's something like 150,000 vacancies in the care sector at any one time. A large proportion of those staff do come from outside the UK, and many of the providers and employers in that area are extremely worried about what this will actually mean for their workforce.
Much of Britain's construction industry has depended on the European Union's freedom of movement policy, allowing into the UK high numbers of building site workers. With employment at an all-time high, Britain's biggest business lobbying body, the CBI, says many companies will be left wondering how they'll recruit new workers. The main exception to the new immigration law will be an expansion of the trial seasonal agricultural workers scheme from offering 2,500 visas a year to 10,000. Even that could disappoint. According to the National Farmers Union, the sector currently brings in between 60,000 and 70,000 workers annually, mostly under the EU's free movement rules. Britain's car manufacturing industry is another area of concern, as is the hospitality sector, which will be hit by the salary threshold approaching $35,000. Immigration into Britain and the need to balance the demands of the UK economy is a political divide here dating back decades. Expect the new rules to be hotly contested. Richard Bestick, CGTN, London.
Let's now take a look at your sports news. Here's what's ahead. Kenya names a 13-man squad to the Los Angeles and Vancouver Rugby Sevens leg.
Tourism is very powerful, and it can open many doors and eradicate a lot of social ills that we face today in our society if it is used very well.